The room is dark, the air sharp with winter's bite. Adam and his wife curl beneath a threadbare blanket, their breath visible in the freezing air. His whisper cuts through the silence. One day this will change. The pause that follows feels heavier than the cold itself. Morning light slips into the cracked window. Adam sits at the edge of the bed, eyes burning with dreams far larger than their tiny room. His pockets hold nothing, yet his gaze carries a world. Beside him, Sarah clasps his trembling hands. When laughter and doubt echo from outside, she doesn't flinch. Her quiet strength steadies him. In her presence, Adam's fragile hope feels unbreakable, even against the world's cruel noise. The nights were the hardest. Their table was bare, save for a half loaf of bread that had to stretch between two people. Adam would break his piece smaller, smiling faintly as if he were full, pushing the rest toward Sarah. "Eat, love, I'm not hungry," he'd murmur. But Sarah's eyes told a different story. She could see the ache in his stomach, the hollow beneath his ribs. She'd tear her bread in half, slipping it back onto his plate without a word. The silence of those dinners cut deeper than the hunger itself. They weren't just starving for food. They were starving for a life free from constant sacrifice. Each night became a quiet performance, both pretending, both hurting, both hoping tomorrow would bring more. Their greatest pain wasn't poverty. It was watching the person they loved suffer, knowing they couldn't take that suffering away. Adam's voice trembled with excitement as he sketched out his vision. Faster services, smarter systems, a business that could change lives. But instead of support, laughter filled the room. His own relatives smirked, one pointing at his worn-out shoes. "You can't even afford socks, Adam, and you're talking about a company?" The words pierced deeper than hunger ever had. Every chuckle echoed like a hammer striking his fragile confidence. Beside him, Sarah sat quietly, her cheeks burning from their scorn. She felt the shame too, but her eyes never left Adam's face. When the room grew colder with mockery, she leaned close, her whisper cutting through the noise. "They'll remember these words." It wasn't just comfort, it was a promise. In that moment, Adam realized that even if the world mocked him, as long as Sarah believed, his dream still had life worth fighting for. The night was merciless. Wind seeped through the cracks, the blanket barely shielding them from the bite of winter. Adam held Sarah close, trying to share what little warmth they had left. She had been strong for so long, smiling through hunger, standing tall against the shame. But this time her strength cracked, her eyes filled with tears. Her voice, barely louder than the storm outside, trembled. "Adam, how much longer can we live like this?" The word struck him like a punch to the chest. For a heartbeat he felt betrayed. But then he saw her face, tired, pale, worn down by nights of sacrifice. It wasn't doubt. It was desperation. She was carrying the same pain he was, and it was breaking her. Adam's jaw tightened as he held her shaking hands. He stared into the dark ceiling above them, the cold pressing against his skin. And in that silence, something inside him hardened. This life, the hunger, the cold, the humiliation, it would not be their ending. With Sarah asleep against his chest, Adam whispered to himself, a vow etched into the night. "Never again. I will change this, no matter what it takes." The next morning, Adam dragged himself to the same dead-end job that barely paid enough to keep them alive. His body was there, but his mind was still replaying Sarah's words from the freezing night before. Each tick of the clock felt heavier, each task more pointless. That's when it happened. Passing by the break room, Adam overheard two managers arguing. Their voices were sharp, filled with frustration. "If these deliveries keep showing up late, we'll lose our biggest client." The other slammed his hand on the table. "No one cares about speed anymore." "Everyone's too slow, too unreliable." Adam froze. The words echoed in his mind like a bell. What if speed wasn't the problem? What if speed was the business? For the first time, his exhaustion cracked open into clarity. He pictured a service built on urgency, on never making a customer wait. His heart raced. The idea was raw, almost ridiculous given where he stood, broke, mocked, unprepared. But as he returned to his station, Adam could feel a spark burning inside him. That frustration, those cold nights, Sarah's tears, it all fused into one thought. This is the way out. The seed of a company no one believed in had just been planted. Adam stared at the small box in his hand. Inside lay his only watch, the last gift from his father, a reminder of family, of pride, of everything he once dreamed to be. Pawning it felt like cutting away a piece of himself, yet he knew it was the only way forward. With trembling hands, he walked into the shop and slid it across the counter. The few bills he received in return felt both heavy and hollow. That evening, Sarah's eyes widened as he carried home a battered second-hand laptop. Fear flickered in her expression, fear of losing what little they had left, but behind it was something stronger, belief. She didn't scold him, didn't ask if he was sure. Instead, she sat down beside him. In their freezing room, the glow of the laptop became their fireplace. They huddled close, sketching names, scribbling delivery routes, building dreams out of nothing but paper and determination. Their hands shook, not just from the cold, but from the magnitude of what they were daring to imagine. For the first time, they weren't just surviving another night. They were building a way out of it, together. And in that dim light, their hunger began to turn into fuel. The email came late at night, a single order from a stranger who had stumbled upon their tiny service. Adam read it aloud twice, almost not believing it was real. Sarah's eyes widened, and for a moment the cold walls of their room seemed to disappear. This wasn't just an order. It was proof. Proof that their dream could breathe. Adam climbed onto his old rusty bike, the pedals stiff from years of neglect. The city air was sharp, but his chest burned with determination. Every turn of the wheel felt like carrying Sarah's hope on his back. By the time he reached the customer's door and handed over the package, his hands were numb, but his spirit felt alive for the first time in years. When he returned, Sarah was waiting at the window, shivering in the night air. She clapped and laughed as though he'd just won a fortune. They shared stale bread and tea to celebrate, but it tasted richer than any feast. That night they didn't feel like two people trapped by poverty. They felt like builders of something real. For the first time, the cold wasn't swallowing them whole, because hope had finally stepped inside their home. Their nights no longer belonged to rest. While the world slept, Adam and Sarah worked like soldiers on a battlefield. The phone would ring at odd hours, and Sarah, eyes heavy, voice gentle, would answer every call as if it were gold. On the other end, Adam raced through the dark streets on his battered bike, packages strapped to his back, his breath visible in the cold. Their tiny room became an office, their kitchen table buried in scribbled notes and delivery logs. There was no comfort, no warmth, no softness left for themselves. They weren't living as husband and wife anymore. They were comrades in a war for survival, pushing forward together against an army of obstacles. Sometimes, exhaustion nearly broke them. Sarah's head would slump onto the table, and Adam would quietly drape the blanket over her shoulders before heading out again. Yet every completed order, every returning customer, felt like stealing a fragment of light from the darkness that had long surrounded them. They had no luxury to celebrate, no time to rest. But each sacrifice stitched them closer, binding their pain into purpose. And though their bodies grew weaker, their dream grew stronger, bright enough to keep them moving through the night. For the first time, Adam felt air in his lungs again. Orders were climbing, and an investor had promised support. That night, he and Sarah dared to laugh, dreaming aloud of warm meals and bills finally paid. For a moment, their tiny room felt brighter. But dreams can break fast. Sitting across from the investor, Adam's heart pounded as he waited for the signature. Instead, the man leaned back, smirking. "You're too small. Too risky. A gamble not worth taking." The words slammed into him harder than any rejection before. Days later, the bills began stacking higher, envelopes unopened, suffocating the table where hope once sat. Then Sarah collapsed with fever, her skin burning while her hands turned cold. Adam held a damp cloth to her forehead, whispering promises he wasn't sure he could keep. Watching her struggle for breath, he felt the walls closing in. Every sleepless night, every delivery, every sacrifice, had it all led them here to another dead end? Adam squeezed her hand, his voice breaking. "Hold on, please. Hold on." The world had mocked him before, but this time, failure didn't just threaten his dream. It threatened the one person he couldn't lose. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and quiet despair. Machines beeped steadily as Sarah lay pale against the white sheets, her body weakened by fever. Adam sat beside her bed, head bowed, his hands gripping hers as though letting go would mean losing everything. The weight of bills, rejection, and hunger pressed on him, making even the act of breathing feel like a burden. Her eyes fluttered open, heavy but steady. She studied his face, saw the cracks of defeat spreading across it. Then, with a voice barely louder than a whisper, she broke the silence. "Don't stop now. If I can fight pain, you can fight the world." Adam's chest tightened. Tears blurred his vision, spilling before he could hold them back. That one sentence, fragile yet fierce, cut through the fog that had smothered his will. Her belief, even in her weakest moment, became his strength. He pressed her hand to his lips, trembling. "I promise," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I'll never quit. Not now, not ever." In that sterile room, surrounded by fear, something unshakable was reborn. Sarah's faith became the oxygen Adam needed. And for the first time in weeks, he rose with fire in his heart instead of despair. Adam walked out of that hospital room a changed man. The fear of losing Sarah had burned away every trace of doubt left in him. If she could endure pain with courage, then he could face the world with fire. From that day he rebuilt, not with hope alone but with relentless action. Every delivery was faster, every system sharper. Adam studied mistakes, cut wasted time, and pushed himself harder than ever before. He rode through rain, through nights so cold his fingers stiffened on the handlebars, refusing to let a single order fail. Sarah, still recovering, took calls with quiet determination, her voice carrying strength even as her body weakened. Together they worked as if the world had given them no choice but victory. And then it happened, slowly, like dawn breaking. Contracts began to arrive, first one, then another. Small businesses started trusting Adam's service. Word spread, and soon their name carried weight. The same relatives who once sneered now called him brilliant, a genius. Adam smiled politely, but inside he remembered. He remembered the thin blanket, the bread dinners, the nights of humiliation. Those memories weren't scars, they were fuel. And he vowed never to let success make him forget where he came from. Years passed, and the company that once lived only on scraps of paper and sleepless nights had transformed into a giant. Towering offices now bore Adam's name. Fleets of trucks and riders carried the brand he and Sarah had once whispered into life in a freezing room. What began with a second-hand laptop and an old bike had grown into a billion-dollar empire. Cameras flashed as Adam stood on a stage, reporters shouting questions, their voices battling to be heard. One cut through the noise. "What drove you, Adam? What kept you going when you had nothing?" For a moment, Adam said nothing. His eyes found Sarah in the crowd, the same woman who once sat beside him in the cold, who whispered faith when the world spat doubt. He smiled, not the smile of a billionaire, but of a man who remembered. He leaned into the microphone, his voice steady, yet heavy with memory. "The nights we slept cold. That pain became our fuel." The room fell silent. In that moment, success wasn't measured in dollars or buildings. It was measured in the fire that hunger, humiliation, and sacrifice had lit inside him. A fire that had never gone out. The lights dim, the cameras focus, and Adam sits in the chair, no boardroom behind him, no trophies on the table, just him, raw and unguarded. His voice carries the weight of every night he and Sarah spent fighting against despair. The words aren't rehearsed. They pour from scars turned into lessons. "Sometimes the world won't believe in you," he begins, his eyes steady, piercing straight into the lens. "Sometimes even love will test you. But if you endure the cold nights, if you carry your dream through the storms, you'll write a story that warms generations." Behind those words is the memory of borrowed meals, sleepless deliveries, and whispered promises in a hospital room. They're not lines for applause. They're the truths that shaped his empire. His story isn't just about money. It's about resilience, about refusing to break when breaking seemed easier. Adam leans back, a faint smile touching his lips. He knows millions will watch, some struggling in their own cold nights. And so he extends the flame. If my rise shook you, hit subscribe because the next story might be yours. The camera lingers. The man who once had nothing now leaves behind not wealth, but hope.